Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful, all praise and thanks belong to God, the Lord of the worlds. May peace and blessings be upon all of God's prophets and messengers, from Adam to Noah to Abraham to Moses to Jesus to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Assalamu alaikum. May peace be upon you, brothers and sisters. Good evening. This is Edward Ahmed Mitchell welcoming you to a very special CAIR program, Fasting in Friendship. As you all know, we are now in the final days of the month of Ramadan. And alhamdulillah, our CAIR team came up with a really great idea, which was to invite some of our friends and supporters around the country to get a little taste of Ramadan, to learn a little bit more about Ramadan and Islam by joining us in fasting. And so some of our friends are doing that with us today. And we also wanted to take today as an opportunity to learn about how COVID-19 has impacted the religious practice, rituals, worship of our faith communities, our sister and brother faith communities. And I'll note that, something happened to me earlier today that I think is quite relevant. A friend of mine, a former judge that I worked with in the past, passed away very recently. And I attended her funeral today. And it was the first time that I'd been inside of a church since the pandemic struck. And visiting church was quite common for me. I would often go to deliver lectures and answer questions about Islam. And I was struck, number one, by the reminder of the similarities that exist between our faith traditions, number one. And number two, by the way that COVID-19 has just radically changed the way that we worship and the way that we grieve. And so today, I think, and tonight is a great opportunity to learn from each other and hear from each other about how we have been navigating this new life over the past year, and still making sure that we are uniting as much as we can during times of celebration, times of sadness, times of worship. So with that, I want to thank everyone at CAIR who helped bring this program together. I want to thank everyone from outside of CAIR who's been working on this great work, and we appreciate it. And now I want to bring on our special guests. We have two special guests we're going to hear from today. The first is Lolita Barrett, who is with the First Friends Church in California. And we're also going to have Jim Poinsett of the Interfaith Partnership of Greater St. Louis in Missouri. Let's bring them both on. Good evening and welcome, Lolita and Jim. Can you hear me?
Yes, alaikum alam.
Yeah. I have my dates here ready for the end of
Jim, it looks like you're showing some delicious food. Make sure you're unmuted. Looks like some delicious food you're showing there. Lolita, Jim, how are you both? Welcome.
Very good. Can you hear me?
Good. Excellent. So Lolita, as we start, I want to invite you to first tell us a bit about yourself and your church. And then Jim, we'll do the same to you. Tell us about yourself and your organization.
Well, I'm in Whittier, California. We are a Quaker meeting, Whittier First Friends Church, and we belong to the Whittier Area Interfaith Council. And we've been worshiping by Zoom for the last year and a half, and it has been quite gathered and centered worship. And we've also been gathering as an interfaith community by Zoom.
Thank you, Lolita. Jim, please.
Great. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here with you this evening. And so I'm Jim Poinsett, and I am the Executive Director of the Interfaith Partnership of Greater St. Louis. And we are a nonprofit organization in St. Louis that represents 34 different religious and ethical communities in the St. Louis metropolitan area. And we provide platforms for diverse religious voices to be heard. We serve as a connector between religious communities and civic leaders, and we also promote interfaith coordination or cooperation through understanding, engagement, and advocacy. And so our hope is to help people have a better understanding of one another and to stand up against acts of violence and religious discrimination.
Thank you, Jim. So, Lolita, tell us about, how has COVID-19, how has the pandemic impacted, the way your community is worshiping, is grieving? Give us a little taste of what you've been dealing with over the past year or so.
Well, as I said, we have been worshiping by Zoom on Sundays, and that has worked very well. We have not held any in-person worship, which has been difficult on everyone, but by Zoom we can see each other's faces, and we can enjoy community and fellowship. We've had a lot of discussion groups about things like violence and racism and spirituality. We usually have been able to gather for dinners, for a Thanksgiving celebration with the interfaith community, and to do our social justice project, which I'd love to tell you about. But everything's had to move to Zoom, but that has allowed us to invite speakers from around the world and from other organizations that we would usually not get to see because of timing or distance, expense. So we've made the most of what we can with this isolation.
And Jim, let's go to you. Tell us about the same thing for you and your community and your organization. You know, what are some of the changes that this has brought about, the pandemic, and have you navigated those? And also, before you start, Jim, I want to welcome on Megan Fair, who is our civil rights coordinator at CAIR and the organizer of this event behind the scenes. I'm just the puppet here in front of the camera. Megan does the hard work. Megan's going to join as a co-host, so we can sort out some technical difficulties we're having behind the scenes. So, Jim, you go ahead and dive into that answer, and Megan will man the ship while we work out this issue.
Sure. So, as I said earlier, we represent 34 different religious and ethical communities here in the St. Louis area. We have a cabinet which is made up of the highest ranking religious officer of each religious community in the area. And this group has met continuously during the pandemic to react on behalf of the religious community about dealing with the different challenges brought on by COVID-19. So as far as offering statements in support of closing large gatherings in the beginning, to as things started to open up, to provide safety and guidance as the religious community started together once again, providing vaccination education and outreach at the time, and so just keeping track and being in touch with civic leaders from at the height of the pandemic, when there was a problem with the hospitals being flooded, what to do with patients that couldn't find care, to taking care of burial and funeral situations for the various different religious communities, because each religious community has a different approach to that. And so working with civic officials to make sure all that was taken care of. And then all our communities have been just taken a variety of approaches. For our archdiocese, for instance, were open pretty quick to having limited gatherings in their congregations. To some of our other churches are just now beginning to open up and have in-person gatherings. So we've been trying to keep tabs on that, to advise where we can on the best way to go about that safely. On our own programming end for our community, we have gone to all virtual programming, which, believe it or not, has actually turned out to have a silver lining in that we've been able to engage many more people than we ever could when we relied strictly on in-person gatherings. And so that has really promoted our education opportunities for people, and we've been able to expand even beyond St. Louis and Missouri borders. We had an online survey of the world's religions back in the fall, and we had over 400 registrants, and they included multiple states and even 4 different foreign countries. So our reach has actually expanded. And that's a silver lining, but we've also been able to touch people in a new way and help them through this time.
Well, Thank you, Jim, for sharing. I know Lolita and I actually know each other through Quaker Spaces, and even in my own Quaker meeting, I've been able to see some British friends joining our Quaker meetings, and it's been a real pleasure to be able to share in our worship together across the globe. It's definitely a silver lining to what is the pandemic. I'd like to transition, if we can, in just a conversation around the interfaith work that you all are doing. You know, a real focus for the Fasting and Friendship campaign was to not only lift up and highlight the importance of interfaith coalitions, but to also encourage folks to share in the fasting experience of Ramadan and in general, the Ramadan experience. So I'm wondering, Lolita, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit more about the specific aims of the interfaith work that you engage with?
Well, I should say that Whittier started as a Quaker colony, and we established the city of Whittier and welcomed faith communities from all different traditions. And so our goal is to create a place that's grounded in the values of love of God and neighbor, and to build a peaceful and just community. And we believe and recognize that of God in every person by truly supporting the material and spiritual needs of everyone. So the work we do now continues and expands a legacy that started in 1898. The Interfaith Council that we belong to and established and belong to has their major thrust for years has been a cold weather shelter for people living on the streets. And from winter, I understand, is different in different places, but in California, it happens from November to March. Serving, each faith community takes a turn hosting and providing meals. And in that place, together, all the different faith communities gather to serve, to get to know each other, and to get to know the individuals who are the least among us, who need the most support, and who have many gifts to bring. So that's kind of our biggest project at this point. We had to not do that this year, of course, because of COVID, but also thankfully because California's made some inroads into providing shelter, and a new city shelter for individuals is now up and running for a couple hundred people. But the Interfaith Council shifted our focus to serve families who are not served by an individual shelter. So we're hosting them in hotel rooms, and we work with them to find services so they can stay in Whittier and keep their kids in school in this area.
Thanks, Lolita. It's kind of the history of mutual aid, right? And when you see communities and faith communities come together to kind of fill in the gaps where structures let communities down. So it's great to hear of the work that you all are doing. Jim, would you like to share a little bit more about the aims of the interfaith work that you all are doing?
Yeah, so our primary mission is education and celebrating the religious diversity that is in the St. Louis area. And we have been, and this past year, we have really focused on highlighting the unique challenges of faith communities, including cultural biases, social inequity, and religious discrimination and violence, and also to act against ideologies of hate and oppression, so anti-Black racism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and xenophobia, all of which have shown themselves in this past year, maybe even magnified a little bit, and because of the circumstances around the pandemic. So we have been really concentrating on that and continuing our educational efforts to promote better understanding and cooperation across lines of difference.
Wonderful. So Jim and Lolita, if I can jump back in. So question about the issue of fasting. Something that is common, I think, in many faith traditions. Obviously, Muslims, we fast some of the Ramadan, and periodically throughout the year, the Jewish community fasts on high holidays and other times. And then fasting also has a rich history in Christianity as well. Can you tell us about the role of fasting, if anything at all, in your faith communities?
Jim, do you want to go ahead? I'll follow up.
I'm happy to share. So, yeah, sure. So I am My day job is to work for the Interfaith Partnership of Greater St. Louis, but I also happen to be ordained in the Presbyterian Church USA, so a Reformed Protestant congregation or denomination here. And so, fasting, so many Christians, and particularly in my Reformed Protestantism, we observe a partial fast that is located in different liturgical seasons in the year, primarily Lent and then Advent, which is the weeks leading up to Christmas, and sort of Lent gets most of the attention about that. And I say it's a partial fast because it's usually giving up one or two things over a period of days, and it all goes back to, it finds its roots in the biblical story of Jesus spending his 40 days in the wilderness. So it's 40 days leading up to Easter in Lent, and then a shorter period of penitence in Advent, leading up to the feast of Christmas. And so, a lot of that has its roots in turning towards finding a time of introspection and reflection, and turning one's life, reorienting it towards God. I would say, in practice, I haven't served in parish ministry in a number of years now, and so, but my recollection of it is that people pay most attention to it at the beginning and at the end. So in Lent, that would be the Christian observances of Ash Wednesday and then Good Friday, and then there's some, nominal effort to give up something or spend some time in practice and kindness, but it's really just those two liturgical seasons, and it's only a partial fast, not anything like what I have experienced today personally, and what I know of Ramadan. That's been our experience.
And yeah, I would agree with Jim that it's a partial fast for the most part, or the addition of a spiritual discipline, and repentance, self-denial, and the goal to remove any distraction from drawing closer to God. Quakers in particular believe that simplicity in worship and daily life help remove those distractions. And we encourage individuals to find those things that help them to draw closer to God. So while Quakers don't teach or observe formal fasting, if a Quaker was drawn to that and felt that it would help them to grow closer to God, we would certainly encourage them to do it and support them in it. And I have engaged in fasts myself during Ramadan and other times when it was deemed helpful to my spiritual growth.
Wonderful, wonderful. So that leads me to my next question, Lolita. What was the experience like? So we've got some people in CAIR who are from other faiths, not Muslim, and they are fasting today just to experiment and see how it is. And I know one of my dear friends said that by 10 o'clock, she was saying, I don't know how you do it. But how is the experience for you? Tell us about it.
Well, absolutely. I think it is one of the most difficult and one of the most enlightening things to do, especially to do it with a community that's doing it for a purpose. I find it hard to fast because it's just physically hard, but I also find it physically hard to pray with Muslims with your physical form of prayer. If you don't do it regularly, you can't do it very easily. But I really did appreciate it. I do appreciate participating because it does remove those distractions from focus on God, because every time your stomach growls, you remember why your stomach's growling. It's to focus on God and focus on prayer. But it also increased my appreciation and willingness to share God's abundance that is just all around us, and helped me to feel drawn together with other people. In our weekly meeting for worship, Quakers include silence, and it's called Communion in the Manner of Friends, or Waiting Worship. And it's a time of intentionally being together, waiting and listening for the presence of God or the Spirit of God. And it connects us in a way that transcends everything. And that focus, total focus on God and community gathered reminds me of what I feel and felt when I fasted with my friends during Ramadan. I will note I also have helped a friend prepare for Eid celebrations for hundreds of guests in her home, and that fellowship, food, and fun were definitely part of the Ramadan experience.
Yes, yes, yes. So hard work and then a lot of good play at the end on the holidays. That's wonderful. I mean, so much of what you described sounds familiar. I think to me as a Muslim, and I'm sure to many of the Muslims watching, right? As Muslims, we fast, to put it simply, because God told us to. The Quran says, "O you who believe, fasting is prescribed for you, as was prescribed for those before you, that you may learn taqwa, God consciousness," right? And the benefits we get of fasting: one, we hope to receive God's forgiveness for our sins. We hope to become more empathetic, right, for those in need, those who go hungry throughout the year through no choice of their own. And that can also, God willing, lead us to become, as you noted, more charitable, right? When you know what it's like to go hungry, it's a little harder to pass a homeless person on the street asking for food, right? Or to hear about someone in need and not want to help them. And so, you do something because God told you to do it. It's good for you, but you can clearly see the benefits. And I think, those benefits exist for people in various faiths. So thank you, Lolita, for sharing that. Jim, how about you? Experienced the fasting before, the Ramadan-like fast, anything like it? If so, tell us about
it. Yeah, so back to my kind of partial fast, right? So in Reformed Protestant Christianity, is maybe give up chocolate for most of 40 days or something like that. So I have not ever experienced anything this intense as far as spiritual practice, or really in my own life. You can't see on the camera, but I'm not really a guy that misses many meals, and so the prospect of going a whole day was a little bit daunting. And I do have the dates right here ready, and hoping that the Central Time cuts in when this ends. I will have our advantage to Central Time. You won't know that I might break a little early, but in all seriousness, though, I think an important part of fasting, whether it's partial fast like what we do in Lent or the Ramadan fast that happens, is about listening for the call of God in your life and where that is, and that provides space because the distractions are put away. And one thing that came up to us, because a lot of our work is highlighting the unique challenges that communities of faith face in the world. And my colleague that I work with, she and I both participated today, and we were having a conversation about, one of the places where where people don't think about this is like the workplace. And so what does it mean to notice that others have different practices, and what that means for the workplace? So would you still have, during Ramadan, if you had Muslim coworkers, would you still have the lunch meeting, right, and force them to sit through that? Or is this an opportunity for those of us that are, in the more normative faith communities, a chance for us to notice and empathize with others and perhaps make that accommodation so everybody has full equity in the workplace, for example? But that that goes on and on. There could be a million different examples of that. But I really like the idea of the self-reflection and the when we share one another's practice by invitation like this, that the empathy that comes from that, and then ultimately understanding that we gain of one another and a better appreciation.
Thanks so much, Jim. A quick transition. CAIR is a Muslim advocacy organization. So as an advocacy organization, we never miss the opportunity to invite people to take action, a very important part of our faith. So I'm curious, both Lolita and Jim, if you had the opportunity to ask our audience today to take one action that was related to interfaith work and re-engaging with our interfaith partners, what do you think that action would be? What would you want someone to be inspired to do after hearing you all this evening or this afternoon, depending on what part of the country you're in? Lolita, would you want to start?
Well, I think the fasting is practicing fasting this one day with our Muslim friends is an excellent idea. But I would just suggest that you commit to going and experiencing worship and fellowship with at least one faith community that you're not familiar with. I participated in a house of worship tour where we each took turns hosting the group, sharing our worship, our food and community, and asking and answering questions with open minds, even the hard questions. It was like the open mosque day, which I love, and I try to take members of my community to every year. And I believe that once we step into a place of prayer with people of spirit and truth, we make friends, and that then we can together begin to work to create the peaceful, just world we all seek.
Thank you, Lolita. Jim?
And I would follow, yeah. And I would follow Lolita's comments that it's about taking notice of who's around you and being curious about your community, and to be curious, seek out invitations to participate in something like this. If your community, if you're in a particular faith community, to reach out to another that you might be as familiar with, and explore the conversation of how to partner together. There might be some shared practice around a season or a day or whatever that the two or many more communities could engage with one another, to take note of the things. Even personally, if you're just driving around and there's notice the rich diversity that is around you, and to notice that, and to be intentional about engaging that sense of curiosity about your community.
Awesome. Jim, Lolita, thank you both so much for joining us tonight and sharing these thoughts. It's been great to fellowship with you, learn from you, hear from you. Megan, we'll give you the final word before we transition to the next segment.
I just want to thank you again, Jim and Lolita, and thank everyone who has pledged to fast in solidarity this Ramadan. There's still an opportunity for folks who would like to pledge to fast. We'll go ahead and drop the link into the chat for you all to see. Our website offers some examples of how to fast during Ramadan, as well as examples of other faith traditions and the roles of fasting that play in those as well. So thank you again, Jim and Lolita.
Thank you both so much. God